Tonight, and anytime that we can get together is a great time, and it's so neat. I just love the encouragement, the fellowship that we have when we come together, that no matter what's been going on in our weeks, during the week, that we can come and we can eyeball each other, we can hug on each other, we can talk and just have fellowship, and it's just a wonderful thing. And we're so blessed here at Farley. So, our series right here, Heroes, the Amazing Stories of Faith. And really, this should never get old. We often, say, the Hall of Faith, the Heroes Hall of Faith, Hall of Fame. And we read it and we get it, we understand it. But, even for me, it's just the going back and really diving a little deeper. And I think that this series, what we're trying to accomplish here is to do just that. Sometimes, getting the backstory is very, very important. Getting the context is important as well, knowing the historical context and so on and so forth. So we try to bring in a lot of that. And the lessons that we've had so far and will be are just great. And I just thank you, brothers, who have agreed to teach, that you have brought some awesome thoughts to us. And so this is where we're going to go tonight. However, before we get into to my particular topic tonight, which is Isaac and Jacob, okay, that there's a section of Scripture that I think it's important for us to look at as we move forward, and it's always good to kind of be reminded of these things. And so that's what we're going to see here. So, looking at verses 1 and 2, we know this, but I want to provide the context again so that when we get to where we're going tonight and every night that we're here, that we have in our minds, what we're talking about. Because the faith, that faith is what? What is faith? Anybody? Well, hey, you got it right from the Bible, didn't you? There it is. Yep. You got it. You see it right up there. So, this faith that we have is the faith that was once delivered to all the saints. Jude writes, okay? And so it's that system of belief. And so that's what we see here in chapter 11. And so you see it. I'm not going to read it. Except I'll start with reading this one because we know the other one. Without faith, it's impossible to please him. Well, we get that. I understand that, if I want to be pleasing to God, I've got to trust. I've got to have a basis. I've got to have a faith as a foundation, before, I can even know God and who he is and what he's all about and all of that. So for whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists. Well, I don't think we have any trouble with that. I think that we probably all agree that, hey, we're kind of right there. We have a relationship. We draw near to God. James talks about, drawing near to God. He talks about, the evil, the problems, that we have. And so we need to draw near to God. We need to submit to God's will. And so, when we do that, we see the rewards that we have. So it's like, yeah, okay, I know that. I've read it, so on and so forth. I understand it. And this is kind of where I want to really kind of focus for a couple of minutes here. Is in verse 13, is that all of these that we've been talking about up to this point, as the scripture says, for these all died in faith, not having received the things promised. So they had faith, they trusted God, they were going out there and doing the best they could. Were they perfect? No. And when we see the stories of faith, and we go back and we look at the various aspects and, the things that were promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, from a distance, it's almost kind of like standing way back and, like, okay, I see the parking lot there. If I get really close, wow, I can really see that. But you get back here and you take a look and things kind of get smaller. So from a distance, all of these characters, personalities better, maybe instead of saying character, Kenny, all of these personalities, these folks, have been looking and trusting in God to do what he said, but they hadn't gotten there yet. Have you and I, have we arrived yet? to the pinnacle of our faith, to the completion of our faith, to that goal? No, we haven't, okay? Now, they were from afar, what the text says. They acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles, and we do too. You know, we're just strangers. I love the movie, and I saw it here again recently. James Garner, actor James Garner, you know, support your local sheriff. And a lot of us probably remember that and kind of dating us, but more me than y'all. But he says, okay, comes into the town, it's full of lawlessness, and you know, they didn't have a sheriff. They actually went through like about 5 sheriffs, okay? And so, you know, like, hey, I'll be your sheriff. Oh, that's fantastic, except I'm not going to be here very long because I'm on my way to where? Australia. Throughout the movie, okay, so he was doing his thing and bringing law and order, and but on the way to Australia. So then there's the second movie, and he's still doing the same thing, and you know, kind of gets out there. But he's getting closer, and that's kind of where we're at right here. Is that now as Christians, you know, this side of the cross, we're closer than they were. Okay. But yet we're still strangers. Do you feel like you're a stranger? What does that mean to be a stranger and aliens on earth, exiles in this translation?
Well, for the Jews, it was anybody that was not a Jew.
Okay, for the Jews, they were it. You know, if you were not a Jew, then you didn't have those promises that we have, right? Strangers and exiles. Something to think about. For the people who speak thus make it clear that they're seeking a homeland, okay? And of course I can't help but think of, you know, Department of Homeland Security. You know, I'm in the Coast Guard Auxiliary. And so, you know, we have that, you know, Department of, you know, we're looking over the homeland. We've got that. That's where these folks here, they were seeking a homeland. Why do people come to America? Want a better life, right? Many reasons. Oh, here comes Linda and Miss Faye. Can one of you brothers help them come in? They're coming through the door. Yeah. Thank you. All right, good. Yep, so if they had seen, it says, if they had been thinking of that land from which they'd gone out of, it's like, well, you know, I kind of like it back there. But God says, no. You're going this way. But if they had gone out, they would have had the opportunity to return. But evidently, they didn't have that opportunity. Had they done that, well, maybe they would have turned around and hiked all the way back to Egypt, you know, to where things were better. So, you know, we want to see it in the next verse, and this is where we're going to kind of pivot from here into, quote, our character studies, our personality that we're going to see here. But as it is, in this, I think, I wanted to hone in on this for myself, okay? And I want you to hone in on this. And ladies, glad to have you back. Good to see you. We've been missing you. We can actually say that in Bible class, okay? We can actually say, hey, good to see you. We're in Hebrews chapter 11, and we're looking at a few verses. This one is in verse 16, so if you're wanting to follow along there, but you can see it up here on the thing. So they were looking for a better country, that is a heavenly one. Those coming to our borders are looking for a better country. Where they're coming from is you know, unsustainable, you know, to say it. I mean, I've never been south of the border. I've been in Laredo, Nuevo, okay? So I've crossed the border one time in Texas. That's as far as I've been. So I haven't been to Central America. We've got a brother-in-law, Kathy's brother, David, lives down in Costa Rica, you know, lives on a nature preserve. He owns a spot in the rainforest and, you know, takes people on eco-hiking trips and does all. I really don't have a desire to go down there, okay? They have these things called snakes, and so I'm out of that, okay? So a lot of the folks there, they're like, hey, we want to go to America because this is the land of plenty, this is the land of promise, this is the land of whatever they're looking for, okay? And so these folks here in Hebrews chapter 11, This is what they're seeking, something better. God says, I've got something better in mind for you. And it's interesting to me that the Hebrew writer says right here, therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God. That's kind of took me back here today when I was reading that again. I go, wait a minute, I think I've missed that before. That God is kind of talking about himself here, isn't he? By inspiration, therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God. Is there times God might have been ashamed to be called? Yeah. Yeah, boy, those people I created, man. I think there was a thing called the flood, a worldwide flood, that God was not pleased, grieved in his heart, okay? But, again, right here, that he has prepared a city. So we're talking about, have to go back to the first part of Hebrews chapter 1 and look at, we talked about Adam, and we talked about, those that were coming down after that. My brain is kind of frozen here at the moment, but, we have Abraham, we have Enoch, we have all of those, and so God says, hey, look, I've got a place for you. And they're like, yeah, I want to go there. And that's where they are. Okay. By faith, Isaac and Jacob. So this is where we are, my topic tonight, out of our personality studies here. By faith, Isaac and Jacob. And again, we know the text here, Hebrews 11, 20, and 21 is what we're going to look at. Timeline right here, you see, goes back from 1850 to 1700 BC. So it kind of gives us an idea of when this was all taking place. A few points to remember here. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau regarding the things to come. Hebrews 12:16, just jumping over the next chapter, says, interesting enough, make sure, and there's a section there that I just took out, but you look at it for yourself. Basically, make sure no one is immoral or godless like Esau. So we're going to look at Esau tonight. But Scripture says, hey, be aware, okay? Be aware of this guy, and don't be like him, okay? So we're going to look at that. Jacob, and just a little bit of background here. Jacob wrestled with an angel of God, and that's quite an interesting story in and of itself right there. That he received a blessing when his name was changed to Israel. And why was that? Because he had this struggle. Genesis 32, 24 and following says that you have struggled with God and you have overcome. So we have Jacob, who becomes Israel. By faith, Jacob at the end of his life blessed each of his each son of Joseph and worshiped God. Is it coming? I think. There we are. Okay. So it was by faith that Isaac promised the blessings for the future to his sons, Jacob and Esau. It was by faith that Jacob, when he was old and dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and bowed down in worship as he leaned on his staff. So again, we see at the start of these verses here that talk about these folks that it was by faith, by faith. So interject yourself. Interject myself. That's what I try to do, is by faith, Ed. Okay? Make it personal. By faith, Sean. By faith, Kathy. Okay? And so this was setting the stage right here. So Isaac, we know the story. Okay? Isaac was a miracle child of what we might call elderly parents today. Senior citizens. Okay? And so Sarah, what did she do? Are you kidding, God? Me? Yeah. Her name means laughter. Both laughed when God said, okay, I'm going to give you a son through whom all the nations of the world would be blessed. Genesis 18:12. God says there in Genesis 18:14, is anything too hard for the Lord? Well, obviously not. Okay? Abraham and Sarah said, look, we're old. Is this possible? Not humanly, but through God it is. But it's interesting that God says by inspiration, is anything too hard for the Lord? Isaac, we know, was the first Jewish boy to be circumcised at 8 days old. And so some of the scholars, those who really delve deep into Jewish history and all of that, they estimate that Isaac was about 37 years old. I'm not sure about that, but they say he was about 37 years old when God commanded Abraham to take Isaac out to sacrifice him. I've always pictured him as maybe a boy or a teenager, but I'm just saying that. What, Kathy, you're? Yeah, no, I'm seeing it from your lips. 12? Was he 12 years old? Was he a teenager? I don't know. But this is supposition, so just take it for what it's worth.
I think it's partially because there's not a whole lot said between that time when he was circumcised and the next scene is
Right.
there to take him up to the offering.
Right.
Just like going back to the garden, there's no timeline of
Right.
when God brought Eve to Adam. Actually, she wasn't even called Eve until later. But when he brought her to Adam, to when they sinned, that lack there of account of what happened there kind of makes us assume that he's still a boy.
Right.
Chances are, though, he's probably not.
Right, yeah. So just very interesting, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Per Jewish medieval scholars, they say that Isaac resembled his father in many ways here. They say that he looked so much like his father that there was no mistake in anyone's mind at the time that they were father and son. So there was such a resemblance, and you'd almost think, well, okay, yeah, most of us here have children, and some look like me, and some look like more like Kathy, and we can say that for all of us. Scholars say that God fashioned Isaac's. This is just what they're saying here. Scholars say that God fashioned Isaac's face to be exactly like his dad's, as the wicked people spread tales about that Abraham, his father, was actually Abimelech, king of the Philistines. So this is what they're saying from these ancient scholars, okay? And it could be that Isaac was an orphan whom Abraham and Sarah adopted. So there are these stories out there, from antiquity that what they say, okay? It's impossible, says the talebearers, those who were spreading these rumors at the time, said it was impossible for Abraham to become a dad because he was 100 years old. Well, verse 12 there in Hebrews chapter 11 says that Abraham was as good as dead. I mean, imagine that. Wow, almost 1 foot in the grave, and he could have been gone, but God says, "I'm not finished with you yet, Abraham." And of course, Sarah was 90. So when people saw Abraham and Isaac with their own eyes, there was no doubt that they were father, son. And this comes from a Jewish library, historical library that's online. And just a little bit more, per Jewish scholars, the greatest test of Abraham in his lifetime, of course, was offering his own son, Isaac. And this is kind of more of a quote. I don't have it in actual quotes, but they say sages, that's the wise guys. I don't mean that, with a pun, but they were wise men. The sages tell us in the Torah that Isaac knew that he was to be the offering of God. While all the necessary things were taken for the sacrifice, there was the wood, there was the knife, there was the fire. And what was missing? The lamb, the actual entity that was going to be sacrificed.
I don't think that he had any doubt after his daddy found him and told him on that altar that who it was going to be.
Right. So Isaac knew that he knew his dad wouldn't be so careless as to forget to bring the sacrifice. And so it says that Isaac, knew that he was to be the sacrificial lamb. In his old age, Abraham realized that God had blessed him in every way. He wanted his son not to marry into the Canaanites, but instead he sent his servant to Haran, which was up north of where they were, to get a wife from his relatives. And so don't marry those people over there. We've got a plan. You need to go back, and this is God's plan here. Interesting enough, the servant placed his hand under his master's thigh, and it was a weird ancient custom to do that, but that, I don't remember. I remember when I was in school at Bear Valley long ago, 30-some years ago, and we were talking about this particular custom, but this is what they did. So the servant would place his hand under his master's thigh, and he swore an oath that, no, I will not take a wife from the Canaanites. We'll go back and get the wife that you want me to have. So the servant was guided by God to find the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah and Nahor. And then, of course, we know the beautiful story of Rebekah, the sister of Laban. As it unfolds, she was asked to follow Abraham's servant, realizing it might be God's doing. And so she follows along, becomes Isaac's wife there in Genesis 24. We know Rebekah was barren, couldn't have any children until Isaac prayed, and God opened up her womb to be able to conceive. And so here is God at work again, showing his sovereignty, showing his all power and his plan as he's revealing this, that God's taking care of it. So they begin to, we know the rest of the story, they begin to carry twins who seem to struggle together before him, before birth. It'll be interesting when Zach and Emily get to come back and they be with us here and they have the boys, and we get to share in their story and all of that, and we may never know if indeed that, did you feel any kind of struggle in there that would we're looking here at this story, and so something was going on there. And they seem to struggle. And so Rebekah asks God and tells the older twin Esau that he would serve his younger brother Jacob. Esau became the father of the Edomites. He was born first, and Jacob came out holding Esau's heel. God saw that in the womb that Esau was not of the right nature to be in the line of succession for the coming Messiah. So he chose Jacob to be the son of promise in the lineage of Christ. And so I had here, did God show partiality here? The custom was the firstborn, the one that would be born first, they would be the one to have the blessing. But that wasn't God's plan. So did God show any partiality here? Like, no, I don't want Esau, but I want Jacob. Was there any partiality? Well, no. We know God does not show partiality, right? Recall that Esau was hungry. He sold his birthright or his inheritance for a bowl of red stew. And so his name became Edom. He would be the father of the Edomites. Edom means red. So here, again in Hebrews 12, jumping over the next chapter, make sure that no one is immoral or godless like Esau, who traded his birthright as a firstborn son for a single meal. You know that afterward, when he wanted his father's blessing, he was rejected. It was too late for repentance, even though he begged with bitter tears. And so, don't be like Esau, okay? We don't want to be like Esau. We don't want to be immoral. Don't be godless like he was. So Isaac stayed in Gerar for a long time. His possessions, he was blessed by God. It was multiplied by 100. I couldn't imagine all of what he had there, and just amazing how God blessed Isaac in that way. Philistines began to envy, and they started to clog up the wells that Abraham had dug. So King Abimelech sent him to a nearby valley where Isaac again went back to those wells to redig them so that they could have water for their livestock. And of course, then the Philistine herdsmen began to resist him over the water, so Isaac moved on. So that wasn't the right place to be. So there, Isaac was hassled again, and he moved to Rehoboth, and finally gaining some separation, some distance, so he could be able to live. And he thanked the Lord for making room for his family and for his herds. It illustrates how Abraham and Isaac was influenced by the Canaanites, where they were just nomads or wanderers. So again, these Canaanite people were not the kind of folks that God wanted his chosen people to be a part of. And so be careful who you link up with. After moving to Beersheba, where God blessed him, Abimelech came to see him and made peace treaty between them. Seemingly to prove God's foresight, Esau began to marry daughters of the Hittites, and it brought a lot of grief on mom and dad. So again, don't be like Esau. Don't be immoral. Don't be godly, godless, rather. In his old age, when he was nearly blind, we know the story here that Isaac was fooled by Jacob and his wife Rebekah, Jacob's mom. They gave the best blessing to the younger son rather than the older one. So we know that Jacob put on the goat skin over his arms to appear that he was the hairy Esau. Okay, and so Esau became to have a grudge against Jacob because he supposedly, stole the blessing. So why would God bless Jacob, who tricked his dad? This is been kind of a mystery to me. They had all of this. There was some trickery that was going on with Rebekah and helping her son Jacob to be able to get that blessing. But God had a plan. He planned that Jacob would be the son in the lineage of Christ. So Jacob was then sent to Haran to live with his uncle Laban until Esau's rage, his anger diminished. So Jacob obeyed his dad, and he went back to a place that's in modern Syria, Padam Aram. I'm not sure how that's pronounced, but he went there to find a wife from Abraham's relatives, so he finally made it up there. While Esau married the wives of Ishmael, Jacob obeyed his father. And so on the way, Jacob has this dream that a ladder is reaching heaven with the angels that are ascending and descending with the Lord standing above. And you see that right here, Jacob's ladder. There is a song by the group U2 that's called Jacob's Ladder, and it's kind of an interesting take, not necessarily on this story, but nonetheless, Jacob's Ladder, is right here how it's depicted. So God reiterates his promise to Abraham about the land and the nation that would come to Jacob's descendants. God told Abraham again that this was all going to come about. Jacob was called to name the place which had been Luz, Bethel, the house of the Lord. And he made a vow to the Lord that he would be his God. So Jacob's like, okay, this place now is God's house. Okay, it's God's house, and God is going to be my God, and I hope he's going to be your God too. So Jacob would keep his promise, and his faith grew. God told Jacob to go home, so he and his family fled Laban, his uncle Laban, along with his household goods. I put HHGs up there, that's the military lingo. All of his stuff, his household goods, took everything, went back. But then Rebekah decides that, she stole her dad's family teraphim, house idols. I'm not sure why, but she did. Laban comes looking for them as they're symbols of power, being the head of the family. Where's my house idols at? Anyway, as it unfolds, Jacob makes a treaty with Laban, and all seems to end well. Genesis 32:22. Jacob wrestled all night with a man, it says. Now, who was this? Was it Jesus? In the form of an angel? Was it an angel? But he wrestled with a man, and it came to a draw. Jacob's hip was dislocated, but he was still blessed because he held on. And so he said that God says, your name will no longer be called Jacob. Your new name will be Israel, because you have wrestled with God and with people, and you have won. I think maybe there's an application here today for us. Do you feel like sometimes that you wrestle with God, wrestle with His Word, trying to understand, trying to hold on? Yeah, I'll say I do, okay? And I think we all do to a certain degree. There's those times that maybe we're discouraged, we don't understand. Satan, there's that spiritual war again that's going on. Putting on our armor, battle rattle, Ephesians chapter 6. But Satan knows, and we are in this spiritual war. We are in this. We're wrestling with God. But we need to hold on. So Jacob promised then he would only worship, you see the letters up there? How do you say that? Chris? Yahweh. Yahweh. You think there's a couple letters that are missing in that name? Yeah, there is, okay? So to the Jew, this was, if you said anything other than how these letters are together, I don't remember exactly how that goes, but the Jews, that's kind of almost anathema to them, so Yahweh. So when you write that, I've never seen that or heard that in the church before until on Facebook. I've got a friend who we connected with when we were at Mayfair with our military outreach ministry, and Chip is his name. Chip was not in the military, but he was a civilian, a Department of Defense contractor, and he was over there in Europe. And so he has said a few times in reference to God, he says G, and then leaves the O out of it, and then D. It's just kind of sort of a play on this whole thing here. Yahweh, God. Anyway, here's the wrestling match, that's going on. So.
On that thing of Yahweh there,
Uh-huh.
I've also seen it expressed as take a deep breath.
Yep.
The letters, the word is, if you think about it, you can say Yahweh as you breathe in and out.
Right,
It's
that's
actually
it,
breath.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's life. One way of seeing it.
Right, right. Very good, very good. Wrestling with God. Jacob, or Israel now, reunites with his brother Esau, settles in the land of Canaan, first near Shechem, then in Bethel. When Jacob arrives in Canaan, he puts away all of his foreign idols as he promised God. Then God blesses him and reasserts the promises given to Abraham. Though Jacob's early adult life is marred by deception of his dad, in that, that Jacob got the blessing instead of his brother Esau. And so Isaac's faith grew, and then by the time of the end of his life, he was able to bless Joseph's kids and tell them of the things to come. So Jacob became the father of 12 tribes of Israel, as we know. His last two sons from Rachel, his wife, were Joseph and Benjamin. Jacob loved Joseph more than his brothers, and there's going to be a separate lesson on Joseph coming up in the next week or so. Excuse me. But we know that when Joseph was young, his dad made what many say the coat of many colors, and it's really in the Old Testament language, is not so much, as we understand it, coat of many colors, but it was a long-sleeved tunic. Okay? Who knows what colors it were? None of us were there. The Bible doesn't tell us that, but that's something there. That garment and Joseph's dream of seeing his brothers bow down to him made them jealous. They lied to his dad that he was dead, sold him into slavery, and Joseph eventually became second to Pharaoh. And so, again, that's just another lesson to come, but here's just some artist rendition of Joseph in his coat of many colors, his tunic, his robe. Judah, one of Jacob's boys, later chosen by God, he was in the lineage of Christ. Judah, tricked by his widowed daughter-in-law Tamar, who posed as a prostitute, he slept with her, she became pregnant. God chose to have her brought into as the mother of Perez in Christ's lineage, Genesis 38. So here we come right back to where we started, okay? It was by faith that Isaac promised the blessings for the future to his sons, Jacob and Esau. It was by faith that Jacob, when he was old and dying, blessed each of his Joseph's sons and bowed down in worship as he leaned on his staff. Hebrews 11, 20 and 21. So that's kind of the background to all of that. I hope that that was something that was certainly beneficial. I know it was a lot for me to try to digest. It's a lot of material to try to put in, try to grasp a hold there. But having some of the background story, really helps me, and hopefully it helps you. So we've got our folks coming in, and we'll have our devotional here in just a few minutes. Okay.